All right, let's jump into this Toronto real estate deep dive. We're taking a look at what's fresh in the market through the eyes of Manoj Aitri.
He's a fellow Toronto agent just like you.
Exactly. And he's put together this amazing newsletter for his prospects with 20 articles covering everything you can think of. Interest rates, what buyers are doing, the rental market.
It's like getting a sneak peek into the minds of our clients, what's on their radar, what they're worried about.
Yeah, really useful stuff. And one article in particular stood out. It's a case that, honestly, I think every agent in the GTA needs to know about.
Oh yeah, the one about the buyer who had to pay a ton of money because they backed out of a deal.
That's the one. Buyer on the hook for $366K in damages after failing to close. It really drives home how important it is to prep our clients properly.
No kidding. Even with the market cooling down a bit, things can get messy fast.
So what exactly went down in this case?
Well, we had a buyer who decided to back out of a $1.25 million purchase agreement.
Classic case of cold feet.
Pretty much. The market was shifting and they got spooked. Happens, right? But this buyer tried to argue that the sellers didn't do enough to try and reduce their losses.
I can see their logic trying to minimize the damage. So what did the court say about that?
They sided with the seller. The judge basically said the sellers just have to take reasonable steps to mitigate, not perform miracles.
Okay, so reasonable efforts, got it. But how did they come up with that massive $366,000 figure for damages?
They broke it down pretty meticulously. First, there's the difference between the original price and what the property finally sold for, which was $287,500 less.
Ouch.
Yeah, then you add carrying costs, things like utilities, taxes, mortgage interest. That was another $31,906.
Those little things really add up.
And the kicker, the interest the sellers had to pay on their new place because this deal fell through added another $47,107 to the bill.
That's a painful lesson to learn. This case really underscores how walking away from a deal isn't just about losing your deposit. It can get way more expensive.
Exactly. And for us, it's a reminder to really make sure our buyers understand their obligations when they sign that purchase agreement.
For sure. Got to make sure they're financially prepared for the long haul. And on the seller side, we need to be clear about their responsibilities if a buyer bails.
Maybe even a good time to review our standard forms and clauses. Make sure everything is crystal clear.
Great advice. Now let's zoom out a bit. Maj included a bunch of articles from the big players, TD Economics, Oxford Economics, Better Dwelling, all looking at what the Bank of Canada might do with interest rates. What's the consensus?
Well, there's some debate. TD and Oxford, they're leaning towards more rate cuts, especially with the economy slowing down and people freaking out about renewing their mortgages at these crazy high rates.
But I saw that TD also predicted rates might settle around 2.5% by late 2025.
Yeah, so it's not a sure thing. But the takeaway for us is, how do these potential changes affect our clients, especially when it comes to mortgages?
That's a big one. We need to be able to explain this stuff clearly, like how a lower overnight rate affects variable rate mortgages.
Exactly. Lower rates, lower payments for those folks. But fixed rate mortgages, they're a different beast. They're tied to bond yields, so they don't react as quickly to the overnight rate.
More complex, for sure. Got to be careful advising clients on which way to go.
And then there's the wild card. Manoj pointed out those potential U.S. tariffs.
Right, those could shake things up, affecting the economy, how people feel about spending money, could even push interest rates in a different direction.
Definitely something to watch. Now, switching gears to the Toronto market itself, Manoj found some fascinating stuff about low-rise versus condo properties. It's like we have two different markets emerging.
This is interesting. Tell me more about this split.
Well, CIBC's 2025 outlook is pretty bullish on low-rise. They see a comeback fueled by lower mortgage rates, but even more importantly, a super tight inventory.
Low inventory. Does that mean bidding wars are coming back?
Could happen, especially in those hot neighborhoods. We might have to dust off those bidding war strategies and help our buyers make their offers stand out.
So strong finances, flexible closing dates, maybe even a good old-fashioned personal letter to the seller.
Exactly. On the flip side, our low-rise sellers need to make their properties shine. Curb appeal, staging, top-notch photos. Gotta create that irresistible package.
Make them fall in love at first sight. Now, how about condos? Are they catching the same wave?
Not so much. Both CIBC and Better Dwelling are saying we might be heading for a bit of a condo slump. Oversupply and investors losing interest. That's the story.
Okay, so different advice for condo clients. What are the key points?
For buyers, it's about being patient. No need to rush. Take your time, explore your options, and don't be afraid to negotiate hard. You have the power in this market.
Got it. And for sellers, it's about managing expectations.
Exactly. Being realistic about pricing and really showcasing what condo living offers. Convenience, amenities, less maintenance, those are big draws for the right buyer.
So knowing your audience and playing to their needs.
Right. And remember those record condo completions CIBC and ORM talked about? That's a lot of units hitting the resale market, which could push prices down even more.
Tough market for condo sellers. You
Right.
need to be upfront with them about the challenges and help them adjust their expectations.
Honesty is key, even when it's not easy. Now, Manoj also found a bunch of articles about government policies and how they might affect Toronto's market. Lots of talk about giveaways at both the federal and provincial levels.
Yeah, GST rebates, stimulus checks, all that stuff. How do you see those impacting the market?
Well, the idea is to get people spending and boost the economy, which might influence how aggressively the Bank of Canada cuts rates. TD Economics and Canadian Mortgage Professional, they both suggested that if the government's already pumping money in, the bank might be less inclined to slash rates too drastically.
Makes sense, like the government is trying to pick up some of the slack.
Exactly. But there's a potential downside. Inflation. More money in people's pockets could drive up demand, and if supply can't keep up, prices might jump even faster.
So, a tricky balancing act. And speaking of government action, there's also that ambitious housing plan from the Liberals, right?
Oh, yeah, the one aiming for 3.87 million new homes by 2031. That's a huge goal, especially with all the construction headaches we already have in Toronto.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Supply chains, labor shortages, building materials going through the roof. It's a lot to overcome. Do you think it's even realistic to build that much that fast?
Tough to say. The Hub did some analysis on construction worker productivity and basically said we'd need a massive boost in efficiency and output to hit those numbers.
So even if the government throws money at the problem, there are logistical hurdles.
Exactly. It's not just about funding, it's about capacity and execution.
Okay, so we've got these ambitious housing targets, potential inflation from all the government spending, and a big question mark hanging over interest rates. How do you see all this playing out in the Toronto market?
Well, it's definitely a bit of a roller coaster right now, lots of moving pieces. But one thing's for sure, the market is in flux. We need to be ready for some bumps along the road.
Makes sense. It's not about having all the answers, but about being flexible, staying informed, and helping our clients navigate this unpredictable landscape.
And speaking of navigating, let's talk about the rental market. It's having its own ups and downs too, right?
Absolutely. Minogi's articles show that interest rate cuts are having a mixed impact on borrowers in the rental market. Some folks are getting a break, but others are still feeling the squeeze.
Okay, so who's benefiting and who's still struggling?
Well, if you already have a mortgage, especially a variable rate one, you're probably seeing some relief. But for newcomers, people just starting out with credit, it's a different story. They're still dealing with high inflation and often unemployment too.
So they're not really getting the benefits of those lower rates.
Nope. They're entering the market at a disadvantage. It just highlights how important it is to tailor our advice to each client situation, especially in the rental market. No one-size-fits-all approach, for sure. Now, Manoj also included some data from rentals.ca and RBC Thought Leadership that shows rent actually going down in parts of the GTA, Vancouver, and the surrounding areas. Does this mean the rental market is finally cooling off?
Could be. It's a little too early to say if this is a trend or just a temporary dip.
What would need to happen for rents to keep dropping?
Well, a couple things could play a role. If buying a home becomes more affordable, some renters might decide to take the plunge and stop renting altogether. And if immigration slows down, that would also impact rental demand, potentially pushing prices down further.
Interesting. So the same forces that are shaking up the ownership market are also impacting the rental market.
Exactly. It all ties together. What happens in one part of the market affects the rest.
Makes sense. So things might be cooling off a bit in the GTA, but it's not the same everywhere. Manoj's research showed some interesting differences in smaller, more affordable markets.
Yeah, it's kind of a tale of two markets. While rents might be dropping in Toronto and Vancouver, places like Saskatoon, Winnipeg, and Regina are seeing the opposite. Rents are still going up.
What's driving that trend?
It seems those smaller markets are becoming more attractive, especially for people who've been priced out of the bigger cities. They offer more affordable housing, which is drawing new residents, and that, of course, increases the demand for rentals.
So even within a cooling market, there are hotspots,
Hmm.
lots for agents to keep track of.
Absolutely. And speaking of things to keep in mind, Manoj highlighted a couple more trends I think we should chat about.
All right, lay it on me. What else did he find?
Well, The Breach, which is an investigative journalism outlet, uncovered a pretty unsettling trend. They reported on a Competition Bureau investigation into potential price fixing by landlords. But here's the twist. They're using AI software to do it.
Wait, AI is setting rent prices. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. How does that even work?
Apparently, these programs analyze tons of data, like vacancy rates and current rent prices. Then they use algorithms to calculate rent increases. The concern is that these increases might be higher than what the market would naturally support.
So it's basically removing the human element and letting a computer decide how much people have to pay for rent. It's a little unsettling.
It is, and what's even more worrying is that the U.S. government is already suing the company behind one of these programs, YieldStar, claiming they're helping landlords create a housing cartel.
A cartel, you mean like they're actively working together to inflate rents?
That's the allegation, and because of this investigation, some landlords have already stopped using YieldStar, which is a good sign. But it definitely raises some questions about the role of technology in real estate and whether it's being used responsibly.
Absolutely, something to keep an eye on. What was the other trend Minaj found?
This one's a bit more positive. It's about using government-owned land for affordable housing.
Interesting. We always hear about the need for affordable housing, but finding the land to build it on is a constant struggle.
Exactly. But a UBC study found that there's a surprising amount of underutilized government land in major cities that could be redeveloped for this purpose.
So we're talking empty lots, maybe old government buildings that are just sitting there.
Precisely. They even use an example in Vancouver, a post office building on Pine Street that's only 3 stories tall. Nearby, there are similar plots of land where they're building 30-story buildings.
Wow, that's quite a difference. Imagine if we could unlock that kind of density on government land across the country.
UBC estimated that repurposing these underutilized sites could provide homes for over 1 million Canadians.
Now, that would be a game changer. But I'm guessing there's some hurdles too, right? Zoning issues, political pushback, that sort of thing.
Of course, it's never simple, but it's definitely worth exploring, especially as we grapple with this affordability crisis.
Agreed. Okay, one last thing before we move on. Manoy found a really interesting study from money.ca that ranked Canadian cities based on affordability for homebuyers.
Oh, yeah, that one was fascinating. They looked at rent-to-income ratios, so how much of your income goes to rent and how long it takes to save for a down payment in each city, assuming you save 20% of your income every month.
A pretty thorough look at affordability for both renters and potential buyers. What were the results?
No surprises here. Toronto and Vancouver were near the bottom of the list.
Not shocking given those sky-high prices we've been talking about. How did those smaller markets we discussed earlier fare?
Much better. Quebec City actually took the top spot. It has the most affordable rent, with folks spending just 21.6% of their income on a one-bedroom. And it also has the shortest time to save for a down payment, just under 3.5 years.
So if you're a first-time buyer looking for affordability and a faster path to homeownership, maybe Quebec City is worth a look.
Something to consider, for sure, especially if those big city perks aren't a top priority.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have that legal case, those two-tiered market trends, the impact of government policies, and all the twists and turns in both the ownership and rental markets.
It's a lot to process, but it really highlights how complex and dynamic the Toronto real estate market is right now. We're seeing some fascinating shifts and some serious challenges emerging.
Definitely. But remember, challenges also bring opportunities. If we stay informed, adapt our strategies, and continue to provide valuable guidance to our clients, we can navigate these changes and help them achieve their goals.
Absolutely. Now, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll dig even deeper into some of these trends and explore some practical strategies for thriving in this constantly evolving market. So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. All right, welcome back to our Toronto and GTA real estate deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already, haven't we? That legal case, interest rate predictions, the whole low-rise versus condo situation.
Government policies, AI setting rents, a lot to digest.
But hey, that's what we signed up for, right? The market never sits still, so neither can we.
True that. So for this part of our dive, I thought maybe we could focus on some practical strategies, things we can actually use in our day-to-day work with clients.
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Well, how about we circle back to that two-tiered market? Low-rise and condos going in different directions. Seems like we need to tailor our advice depending on what our clients are looking for.
Absolutely. So let's say we're working with buyers who are interested in low-rise homes. What do we need to prepare them for?
Well, with inventory so low and those attractive mortgage rates we talked about, demand could really heat up.
So could we be looking at a resurgence of bidding wars?
It's definitely a possibility, especially in those popular areas. We might need to coach our buyers on how to make their offers really stand out.
Okay, so back to bidding war tactics. What are some key things buyers can do to be competitive?
Well, showing they're financially solid is a big one. Having a pre-approval in place shows the seller they're serious and ready to go. Being flexible with closing dates can also be a huge plus.
Makes the seller's life easier, shows you're willing to work with them.
Exactly. And sometimes it's the little things that make a difference. A thoughtful, personal letter can really connect with the seller on an emotional level, show them how much the buyer loves their home.
Adds that human touch. Okay, so buyers need to be prepared to fight for those low-rise homes. How about sellers? What's our advice to them?
For them, it's all about presentation, making their property shine, especially when there's not a lot of competition.
So curb appeal is still king.
Absolutely. First impressions are everything. Make sure the outside is inviting, well-maintained. Inside, professional staging can really elevate the look and feel of a home.
Helps buyers picture themselves living there.
And let's not forget high-quality photos. Those online listings are often the first thing buyers see. Gotta grab their attention.
Make them want to see more. Okay, so low-rise, it's all about standing out and being competitive. But condos, that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
Definitely a buyer's market right now. Oversupply, lots of new units coming on the market. It's all working in their favor.
For buyers, patience is key. Take your time, see what's out there, and don't be afraid to negotiate. They have the power in the situation.
So really drive a hard bargain.
Exactly. With so many options, they can afford to be picky.
Okay, got it. Now, for sellers who are trying to move a condo in this market, what's the game plan?
Honesty is crucial. We need to be upfront with them about the current situation and help them set a realistic price.
Yeah, those can be tough conversations, especially if they have a certain number in mind.
I know, but underpricing doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can actually attract more interest, maybe even spark a bidding war.
Get those buyers excited.
And we need to highlight those condo perks, convenience, amenities, lower maintenance. Those things really resonate with certain buyers.
It's about knowing your audience
Yeah.
and tailoring your message.
Exactly. Now, remember all that talk about interest rates? It's still a big question mark, and it's tough to give concrete advice when we don't know for sure what the Bank of Canada will do.
It's like trying to predict the weather.
For sure.
Yeah.
But we can equip our clients with the knowledge to make good decisions, explain the difference between variable and fixed-rate mortgages, the pros and cons of each.
So they can choose the best path for their situation.
And those U.S. tariffs we talked about. Can't ignore those either. They could really shake things up.
Yeah, they're the wild card. How do we talk to clients about that kind of uncertainty?
Honestly, I think just being honest is the best approach. Acknowledge that we don't know for sure what will happen. Explain the potential consequences if those tariffs do go into effect.
Prepare them for a bumpy ride, maybe.
Exactly. Now, how about that rental market? It's a mixed bag out there. Some
Hmm.
places rents are dropping, other places they're still climbing.
Makes things interesting. How do we advise clients in such a fluid environment?
It's all about local knowledge. If we're working with renters in the GTA, for instance, we can tell them that there might be opportunities to negotiate lower rent.
So it could be a good time to be looking for a place.
Potentially. But we also need to be realistic. If buying becomes more affordable, we could see those rent declines reverse.
So it's not a sure thing. The rental market, just like the ownership market, is influenced by so many different factors.
Absolutely. And speaking of factors, remember that investigation into AI-powered rent-setting software. That could have major implications down the road.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy, right? Algorithms deciding how much rent people pay. Feels a bit too Big Brother for my liking.
Definitely raises some ethical questions, something we need to be aware of and discuss with our clients.
Okay, so we've talked about strategies for buyers and sellers, the impact of interest rates and tariffs, the roller coaster ride of the rental market. What's the key takeaway here? What's the one thing we should really be focusing on?
I think it's about trust. Building strong relationships with our clients and being the steady hand they need in this crazy market.
Absolutely. They're looking to us for guidance and reassurance, especially when things feel so unpredictable.
And that means going above and beyond, showing our expertise, being proactive, and always putting their interests first.
So, concretely, what can we do to build that trust and really demonstrate our value?
Communication is key. Sharing market insights, keeping them updated on trends, explaining how it all affects them.
Newsletters, blog posts, maybe some video updates on social media.
All good options. But it's not just about blasting information, it's about those one-on-one conversations, really listening to their concerns and providing personalized advice.
Being a trusted advisor, not just a salesperson.
Exactly. And that means being honest, even when it's tough. We need to be upfront about the challenges, the uncertainties, help them make decisions based on a realistic view of the market.
No sugarcoating.
Yeah.
People appreciate honesty.
For sure. And it's not just what we say, it's what we do. Being proactive, negotiating on their behalf, fighting for their best interests.
Going that extra mile. Being their advocate.
And don't underestimate the power of networking and collaboration. Sharing knowledge with other agents, learning from each other, we can all benefit.
Love that. Supporting each other, raising the bar for the entire profession. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to ask you a question. How do you see your role as a Toronto real estate agent evolving in the years to come?
That's a good one. It's clear the market is demanding more from us. More expertise, more adaptability, more dedication to providing truly exceptional service.
Well said. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some even bigger questions about the future of Toronto real estate and how we can position ourselves for success in this constantly changing environment. And we're back for the final stretch of our Toronto real estate deep dive.
Wow, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've covered a lot of ground. From that legal case to interest rate predictions, the low-rise versus condo dynamic.
Government policies, AI in the rental market. So much to think about.
But that's the beauty of these deep dives, right? We get to really explore the nuances of the market and what it all means for us and our clients.
Absolutely. But now I think it's time to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Right. What does all this tell us about the future of real estate in Toronto and the GTA?
Big question. And if I'm being honest, I don't think anyone has a perfect answer.
No crystal ball, unfortunately. But we can look for patterns, analyze the trends, and try to make some educated guesses.
Exactly. And one thing that really stood out to me from all the articles Manoj put together is that the Toronto market is becoming increasingly complex and unpredictable.
Definitely. There are so many forces at play. The global economy, government policies, new technologies, shifting demographics, even the possibility of trade wars.
It's a lot to keep track of, and it makes predicting the future even harder.
Absolutely. But it also highlights the need for us to be adaptable, resilient, and open to new ways of thinking.
So as agents, we can't just be salespeople anymore. We need to be strategic thinkers, market analysts, trusted advisors who can guide our clients through these uncertain times.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That means we need to keep learning, stay ahead of the curve, and really hone our skills in areas like negotiation, market research, and financial analysis.
We need to be well-rounded professionals who can offer comprehensive support to our clients, no matter what challenges the market throws our way.
And let's not forget the importance of building strong relationships. Relationships based on trust, transparency, and a genuine commitment to our clients' best interests.
Couldn't agree more. In a market as volatile as this one, those relationships become even more crucial. Clients need someone they can rely on, someone who'll be there for them through thick and thin.
Exactly. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. Considering everything we've discussed, what steps will you take to thrive in the ever-evolving Toronto real estate market?
That's a great question to ponder. And I think it starts with a commitment to lifelong learning, a willingness to embrace new technologies and strategies, and a dedication to providing exceptional service to our clients.
Fantastic advice. And I encourage everyone to take a closer look at those articles Manoj shared. They're packed with valuable information and insights that can help you navigate the challenges and seize the opportunities that lie ahead.
And remember, we're all in this together. Connect with your fellow agents, share your knowledge, and support each other. By collaborating and learning from one another, we can all succeed in this exciting and dynamic market.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Toronto real estate market.
Until next time, happy selling.